like, I am not going to be defending him at all. There's a part
the Daemon defending ends now.
the line was drawn. I'm not passing over it.
Dragon claw, wing and scale. Come now, let's examine a tale of the greatest beast ever considered. Another episode of Big Flying Lizards.
You know, I really don't want to make a habit of stealing other people's bits or anything, but with the conversation that we kicked off everything last week, whether Matt Smith is hot or not, when he came in with the shortcut hair, I mean, I just felt so inspired that, you know what, sometimes you just need to take some risks.
This is one for the YouTube audience, it would seem.
This is one for the YouTube audience.
Can we get a close-up? Turn to the camera, please.
The problem is, though, while Matt Smith...
Oh, geez, you were right on your mic.
Right. The problem is, though, while Matt Smith, when he comes in with a shortcut, he looks like a royal prince of Targaryen lineage. I, however, look like somebody who'd be pulling you over in front of a Dunkin' Donuts. So... That's my contribution for the show this week. I figure, you know what? I actually did it the same day. I watched the episode and then I decided to go trim it up, and here I am, Officer Wilson reporting for duty here.
Yeah, it's so for the audio listeners, it's a I mean, you got a little stubble along with it.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm looking at a beautiful mustache. Officer status is that comment is not unwarranted, but I think it looks good.
Oh, thank you. The beard will be coming back.
It's a temporary. You're not that committed to the bit then.
No. I am a Baratheon at heart. I am not a Targaryen.
I'm just gonna say this because this is where we're starting. I'm not sure that I was too keen on the haircut in the episode. If I'm being entirely honest, I feel this more. This whole situation across from me.
I feel like there's a few female listeners that you might need to inform on that then, because they might have a different opinion.
What are you talking about? As established last week, I am an authority on hot or not. I made one claim.
Hey,
let's save it for the actual scene because it's sort of a cumulative effect. But I'm not and that's like I'm not sure that I loved him with the long hair, but now that it's gone, I miss it. So maybe it's just me.
It's incest hot.
Welcome to Big Flying Lizards, a dragon movie and television podcast. I am one of your hosts, Austin Snyder. And across from me is one of my oldest and dearest friends and my podcasting partner, Mr. Bryce Wilson.
Officer Wilson in here for duty.
Mr. Officer Wilson. All right. I can keep that up for one episode.
I should be wearing sunglasses right now.
Have you ever replaced the bands?
No, the ocean claimed them, and I've never been able to replace them since then.
They belong to the sea now.
Just like the crab feeder.
Anyway, now that the episode proper, we're in it. Let's. How about you tell the audience what we're in for today?
You know, we are going to be still doing our House of the Dragon kick. Season 1, Episode 4, King of the Narrow Sea. I'm just going to straight up say it. I feel like this is the first real Game of Thrones episode.
This episode rules.
It's a great episode, and it feels so much like just what Game of Thrones was when it first came out. There was an overabundance of sex. There was an overabundance of prostitutes. There was violence.
The politicking is very much throughout this.
The politicking, the planning.
Which if I could float something out, I feel like that's where this show is excelling.
Yes.
So far. And that's my favorite part of Game of Thrones. I mean, yes. I like the action and dragons, I mean, of course. But the whole like maneuvering. I mean, it's namesake. The Game of Thrones is what I think is actually great about that show, and that's part of my whole thing. My thesis is that this one season of House of the Dragon being better than any individual season of Game of Thrones. I think it's outdoing its own game. And I'm sort of going off on a tangent here, but this is an exemplary episode. I'm excited to talk about it.
Oh, there were moves being made. There had been moves previously made that were coming to light that I'm excited to break down. But excuse me. We start the episode off at Storm's End, house seat of House Baratheon.
Dower. It is not a happy opening.
No, it is not. Well, Rhaenyra seemed to be finding it an amusing situation. That was sort of what I was taking note is that she wasn't like impressed with her suitors, but she certainly was amused with who was coming.
Making the best of a difficult situation.
Yes.
The first shot, though, I want to call some attention to.
Okay.
Because I feel like that's always a statement. The first and last shot of any piece of media. The first shot of this episode is of it's a close-up of the brooch, the necklace.
Yes.
That Daemon gave Rhaenyra.
Yes.
And this emphasized in a scene where she is being presented a number of suitors, potential suitors.
Yes. No foreshadowing at all.
No, I see. I mean, I float that out there, but I don't think it means anything.
No. Like most shows, the first shot is significant. Not House of the Dragon. I did like how Rhaenyra was like able to very smartly insult her suitors, like. When the first guy that was like droning on and on, she just casually said, "What was my grandmother as beautiful?"
Roasted.
Yeah, like, and it's like light enough that he doesn't even know that he was getting roasted in the moment until everybody started laughing. And then our poor Blackwood boy.
Oh, this poor kid.
Like, yes, you have to blame the families that are involved, the parties that are involved, but you also have to blame, like, as they'll say later in the episode, both Alicent and Viserys set these up and was very much like bringing them.
We don't get the details on that. Like, was it an open call of like, okay, you're of this degree of nobility, then you can make an offer, or was it invite only?
I definitely feel like it was like a job application. You had to you had to have your master's degree, you had to have at least 3 years of experience. Like, they definitely had, like,
so was it like a hiring event? Like American Idol, where they've already pitched themselves to like 4 buffers before they get to the princess.
This is Westeros Got Talent. But Rhaenyra clearly is not. She's not putting up with it. She's not enjoying it. And again, the poor boy, he's over there. He's trying. He didn't come up with that speech. More likely than not, somebody told him exactly what to say. And he's got this Bracken asshole over here who's just chiding him the entire time. And you know what? I think he had every right to pull his sword out and
listen.
In the world of Westeros.
There's something oddly tragic about that whole interaction, especially how neither of them clearly had any chance at all of actually getting Rhaenyra's hand.
Yes. You also have to understand, when it comes to House Blackwood and Bracken, there is lore behind it. These two houses have hated each other and have been at war with each other for centuries before the Targaryens came over. Like, they've been I can't remember who said it, but somebody leaned over to Rhaenyra and said the Blackwoods were kings of the Riverlands before the Targaryens. The Blackwoods and the Brackens were fighting each other for land, and everything in there. And even once we get up to a spot in a Game of Thrones, the House Blackwood and House Bracken, even though they're on the same side as the Starks, they still hate each other and like are trying to undercut the other house at every chance they get. So again, they're not going to go into this whole lore about two minor houses compared to the Targaryens, but there's...
So you're saying it wasn't just about Rhaenyra in that scenario?
No, it very much is. These are two houses that hate each other. And in a world of Westeros, when you get insulted, you can demand... like it's very much in line. Like there, nothing like there's a reason Rhaenyra wasn't like, well, he's going to be arrested. Like, but yeah, you do see the kid, like once he kills the guy, like he's like throwing up. Like,
yeah, it's a heavy way to start the episode.
Yeah. So Rhaenyra leaves and she sails back to
King's Landing.
And this is like the first time, and I could be wrong, but I feel like this is the first time in the show that Rhaenyra verbally expresses concern about upsetting her father. Like,
yeah, because she reveals to Cristen in this scene, I believe, that she is returning early.
Yes.
She was on a tour meeting whole batches of suitors, again, American Idol. She was cruising across Westeros looking for the perfect special someone. But she has cut it early. She just couldn't take it anymore after that last one, and she is returning home early.
Yes. And
she's worried about how he's going to take that. I would be. It's kind of...
Oh, and again, I'm not trying to rip into Rhaenyra, but this is technically what Rhaenyra asked for in the last episode. Like, she was getting angry at her father for trying to get all these guys suited up. So the king was like, all right, you get to pick your own suitor now. That means you have to go out and do these things. It's like, again, it just comes across to me that Rhaenyra is spoiled, and I know that that's a bit of
true.
I mean, for a princess, like, yes, that's a given, but at the same time, I don't really know what she's expecting.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's... I still, like, they make comment of it later in the episode, like, that was a lot of work to put together that whole situation.
Yes.
And so for her to just drop it and not even see it through is kind of disrespectful. At the same time, you can understand her plight, that it's like none of these offers are appealing at all to her. And after a certain point, it's just like, what is the point? Yeah.
No, I completely agree with that. But also, again, not to jump ahead too much, but they're still dealing with with Corlys feeling insulted by the last wedding's slight. How many houses out there are now feeling slighted like House Velaryon? Now, House Velaryon arguably is the most important house to be pleasing at this point because they're the ones with the most ships, and ships are the next best thing in Westeros and to dragons. And they also are the wealthiest house. So wanting to make sure, and I even think, again, like, not to jump, we'll save that in a bit, but as they're talking at 7:22, we get Caraxes.
And we better make special note of it because that's it.
That's the only dragon we get for the episode.
This is a dragon light episode.
That's the only time we see a dragon, and Daemon comes in diving in, and he messes with the boat, and Rhaenyra like hits her head hard.
He swerves him.
Like it very much could have ended poorly for her.
But it didn't.
It didn't, no.
But this does signal to her. This gives her a bit of heads up that Daemon is in town.
Yes.
He has returned. It's been what, 4 years?
Been
longer?
4 years. Well, she saw him when he took Dragonstone.
Yeah. She went back for the egg.
She went back for the egg, which I think you're right. That would have been 4 years ago. Because this was a year after the last episode.
Yes.
And then the last episode was 3 years, roughly, between episode 2 and 3.
Yeah. So that 4 years since Dragonstone, longer since he's been to King's Landing.
Yes. Yes. I think it's been about 5 years maybe since he's been at... No, it was 6 months.
Point is, the boy is back. It's been a long time.
Yep. It's been a while. Which takes us to the King throne room.
Well, in leading into this scene, I do want to mention that the way King's Landing is presented in this sequence, like leading up to this moment, is it's very much in contrast to the King's Landing we are introduced to in the pilot episode, in that it's kind of like overcast, like muted looking. There's just sort of like an air of depression that has descended upon the entire visual landscape of this show leading into this episode, especially compared to that first one, which we made note of in our episode. It's starting to look a lot more like a Game of Thrones type world.
Yes. No, I definitely agree with that. Might be setting the tone for the show.
Yeah, a tone for a certain kind of episode. But we do then go into the throne room, where I think there's something like 250 extras in costume, which is just insane to logistically think about. But the royal court essentially receives Daemon.
I do want, like, again, I know that courts generally do fill up and people make note to come, but it very much, I feel like they made an emphasis to show everybody going to court. It wasn't like a gradual trickle of everybody. Like, it was like almost somebody let the doors open and everybody was filing in. Like, it was.
Oh, I'm sure that somebody spots Caraxes up in the sky, and it's dinner bells.
Yeah,
or drama dinner bells.
They want that hot tea. They want to see what's going on. They want to see, because he was banished last time.
Yeah. But I'm sure word has got back that he has seen some success to the kingdom's benefit, the realm's benefit.
He's a hero. Like, he very much saved the realm. He killed a sinister villain who had some notoriety.
He was so ugly.
He was so ugly.
He had to go.
And he was a prince, too.
Yeah, Prince Crab Peter. Did
Um,
you notice that Viserys notices Rhaenyra in this scene? And he's like, what are you doing? It's just like a quick look, but like clearly this is the first he's seen her since she's been back.
I don't think I caught on to that because I was more looking at his drip. And
Fair.
also, I do want to make note that he was handed his crown and he was handed Blackfire. Blackfire being the Valyrian steel sword that was Aegon the Conqueror's sword. He seems to have it there as a symbol of his authority because you were definitely never going to see him wield Blackfire.
I mean, you say that at the start of this episode, but there's a scene later, I'll just say it, where he does draw a blade, which feels very not Viserys.
He doesn't draw Blackfire, though.
Fair. There's a level further he could have taken it.
Yes. He draws a blade that's sort of more Viserys's his capacity.
He pulls out the prophecy blade. Yeah, that is a little more his style.
Rather than the great sword, that's blade is probably like a bit wider than a hand, but I digress. I made note, large crowd, and the king is visibly nervous.
I'd be.
I'm not saying that he shouldn't be, but it's very much on his face, and especially where you think that he grew up in King's Landing, he grew up in the sense of being a royalty, you'd get a sense that he'd hope that he'd be able to control his emotions a little bit. Not control his emotions, but control his facial expression a little more. So the fact that he's not controlling it can just sort of tell you the place that he is right there. And I also wanted, like, again, I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but Sir Westerling and Otto, like, were standing almost like in a protective stance in front of the king.
Yeah, Otto, his Daemon's mortal enemy.
But what's he gonna do in a protective sort of situation?
That's a good point.
Like,
Who do you think wins in a fight between Viserys and Otto? No weapons, just fists.
how much time do they have to plan? Because if there's planning,
30 minutes.
30 minutes, Viserys. If there's at least half a day, Otto takes that because Otto can plan it.
He's a mastermind, a master manipulator.
Viserys, even though he's not got a lot of it, he's got some dragon energy too.
That's really what it is. It's just the Targaryen blood would swell up and he'd have the day.
Otto would wake the dragon. But yes, and after a while, the rogue prince himself shows back up into the throne room, still decked out in his leathers and armor.
Yeah, he's not in plate, he's in leather.
Yeah.
He's he has a crown of sorts. It's sort of a homemade like Michael's craft type setup, and he's carrying the crab feeder's hammer.
Yes. And I don't think I registered the first time that I watched it that was the crab feeder's hammer. Like, I know that it was, and obviously it was a weapon that he took from the battlefield, but going back and seeing how we saw the crab feeder, like, crucifying people onto the wood, like, it makes sense that would be his actual weapon.
Yeah, because as we established in the last episode, I'm not even sure that the crab feeder could, like, wield a broadsword.
No.
He was not in the best shape.
No, not quite.
I already said it, but Daemon with the short hair, not my favorite look for him. I'm not gonna say it looks bad, but thematically I'm with it because it feeds into how he's like kind of reborn.
Yeah.
And after that, what he went through at the end of the last episode. So for him to have reinvented himself in a little bit and to have manifested that physically, I think it fits.
I think that if he would have come in court clothes like we see him later, because I think it actually looks pretty good when he's wearing like actual clothes rather than the armor.
It looks better, and part of it for me is because he has the new cut, and then on top of it he has the crown, and he's not wearing his plate. So it just kind of, the whole setup makes his head look a little big.
Yeah.
And maybe it's all just relative, but it just read a little goofy to me, but it was already such a tense scene. Like, it didn't ruin it for me.
No, I don't mind it. I'll say that. Something else that I thought was worth noting is that Rhaenyra was like following Daemon when he was walking. I don't know what the term is, just walking down the middle of the courtroom, just
He making his entrance.
Yeah, making his entrance.
He's strolling.
yeah. Like, and he definitely just walked in like he owned the place. Like, it very much was no reverence in it. Like,
Yeah. He's walking in like he owns the place.
and
And that's the air in the room. Very much everybody like, this could go anyway.
yes. So what did you think of when he threw the, I thought there was a bit of significance to what he said when he threw the hammer down at the throne. Like,
Yeah, because okay, so to summarize,
Yeah.
he greets the king,
Yeah.
and basically like repledges his allegiance.
Not quite, because before he repledges his allegiance, he like throws the hammer down and he's like, melt that down with the others.
I thought that's how he ended it.
No, that's how he started it. That's how he got it kicked off.
Which sorry, this is my bad. We skipped over the title drop where he's like, they've named me the king of the narrow sea.
Well,
But I know there's only one true king.
well, that was, so the first thing he does and says is he throws the hammer down and he says, add that to the others.
You're
But-
right. I got it all out. I'll let you cover this
No,
one.
no, sorry. No, I'm not. It's, to me, when he does that, he's giving the victory to, even though like everyone knows it was Daemon, he's giving the victory to the Iron. Like he's saying, melt it down with the others, showing that the Iron Throne conquered this enemy.
Yeah. The victory belongs to the crown.
Yes, rather than the victory. Like, even though we all know Daemon wanted the victory, he did not want Viserys to have the victory. I think he was symbolizing, like, I did this for you. Like, that's his way of saying, this is your victory. I'm giving you this victory rather than you coming and taking the victory.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But I will state here that I feel like the central tension of this episode is us as the audience trying to decipher what is Daemon about at this point. So where that makes sense, especially for like, based on our discussions, where we feel like Daemon was before the end of episode 3, where his like purpose in life was very much to like serve his brother and like prove himself. It seems, I mean, there's other stuff in this episode that sort of indicates that he's graduated beyond that. So to me, this is like, okay, is this a sincere play, or is this him like playing along and sort of waiting for his moment to strike? I'm not sure that there's a concrete answer one way or the other.
I don't think there is. Just like I totally get that, but I really still feel like even though he was reborn after the last episode, he's still just seeking that approval from his brother. He's still just seeking. And
I think it's a complicated character. I think it's gotten more complicated. I think that is still within him, but I think that he has other ambitions within him now.
Yes. And that's when he does announce that the Triarchy has been crushed and that he was named King of the Narrow Sea by his troops and by the Valyrians. And there was that tension in the room because Viserys was...
Pause for effect.
Yes. He's going over his lines in his head. And Viserys, like, even called him out, like, oh, you're
oh my God. I just realized I quoted Despicable Me. I'm sorry about that. That movie's okay.
There's worse things to quote.
Can I do my impression now?
Go ahead.
Again, rather. He says, but I know there's only one king. And I forget what the line is. Oh, brother.
I don't... and he just straight up just takes it off and he gives him... The king reacts as if, like, a cat just gave him a dead bird. Like, he's like...
Oh, lovely.
Like, thanks. And then, I mean... You can tell there's still friction between the two of them. Like you can like for me, and I was even trying to see, like I wanted Viserys to be able to forgive his brother and move past it. But like I was just thinking about how he's still thinking about how his brother won the heir for a day incident situation, taking Dragonstone, taking the heir's egg, and then completely defying his orders to go back to Runestone and went and started a war. Like, so I'm sure there's a lot of complicated emotions within Viserys, and you can tell that he hasn't quite forgiven them, even though they do eventually like embrace and hug it out. But throughout, like I did make note, the court was almost like holding their breath the entire, like it was tense in there.
Oh yeah.
But he visibly forgave his brother. He gave him the embrace.
Yeah, like publicly,
yes.
Which is a big deal.
Yes, a very big deal.
I mean, all of this is a little performative on both of their parts, but it means something that this is how they want the perception to go.
Yes. And everyone cheers, and we move on. Is there anything else you want to cover real quick of the...
No, we got it.
All right. we move on to the actual celebration in the, I think they're in the Godswood doing this.
Yeah. The Red Keeps Godswood.
Yeah. And the first thing that we notice is Alicent is not pregnant anymore, which, I mean, it's been a year, so yes, obviously but I don't think they stated that. Did they state it's been a year earlier?
So there is a comment, because this becomes important later in the episode, that they're very clear in like the lapsed episode that it's taking place on Aegon's second name day, and they also outlined that Rhaenyra is 17 at the time.
Yes.
And then there is a comment early in this episode about I think I have the actual quote. But it's something to the effect of the princeling of 3.
Gotcha.
Which is how that they are establishing there has been at least another year, which means Rhaenyra is 18.
Very important note.
It's almost self-conscious.
But I didn't pick up on the time lapse other than the time difference, other than Alicent wasn't pregnant anymore.
No.
Like,
and you also see there's a scene of her like holding the baby, and
yes.
it's not a newborn.
No.
So there's some indication, and between all of that, been about a year.
Yeah. And I mean, this scene in particular to me shows that even though we're having that discussion on how Viserys is like debating whether or not to forgive Daemon, I feel like he is willing to forget. Like, this is not this conversation, everything that's going on here shows more that it's not just a public persona. I'm sure there's a lot of like, personally, he's ready to forgive because he's there and he's like, oh no, mother, you were always mother's favorite.
Oh yeah. He's being chummy. Yeah. He's making a go for it.
Yeah. Whether wine is involved in this or not, which
surely a little.
It's showing that they've made up to an extent, and like they're able to have like some level of relationship going. And I made note that I feel like, at least for the first 3 episodes, this scene in particular is everything Daemon wanted. Like, he wanted to be celebrated by his brother. He wanted his brother to want to be around him, and he's getting everything that episodes 1, 2, and 3 Daemon has wanted. And in particular, each time that they showed Otto was not happy.
Which means Bryce was happy.
Whenever Otto is not happy, I'm having a great time. This is a great episode, Austin. Rhaenyra is also just very happily and casually interacting with the king and Alicent as well. It's not just so you're seeing that level of forgiveness that's going on now. It could be that she knows that she's probably pissed off her dad and Alicent, and she's like,
perhaps,
so she's not gonna be terrible at a celebration to get in more trouble. But I think it is worth noting that she is interacting with the king, and she's interacting with Alicent in a very positive way as well, this is the first time that we've really seen her since her father and Alicent got married, that she's really having some form of friendship.
Yeah. So, just to recap the scene, so they're being all chummy.
Yeah.
And then Rhaenyra joins them, and at the same time roughly that Alicent does.
Yeah.
And Alicent's like, "Oh, you haven't seen the new tapestries." and Viserys is like, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. He doesn't want to see the tapestries."
It's like, "Oh, do you want to see the tapestries?"
Yeah.
Which, in the king's defense, like, Alicent knows who Daemon is. She's been in court. It's not like Daemon's a complete stranger.
It's a fair offer, though.
It is a fair offer, but
but then Rhaenyra's like, "I would want to see the tapestry."
Yeah. And again, like, I want to believe that it's Rhaenyra making an effort to build her relationship with Alicent again, but there's also in the back of my mind scratching, like, She knows that she's fucked up. She knows that she's pissed the king off and probably pissed Alicent off, so she's on her best behavior.
Sure. But then the king sort of belittles that comment as well. And then Rhaenyra isolates from the conversation, and she's joined by Alicent.
Yes.
Who I'll say already in this episode is looking really depressed.
Yes. She looks miserable in that point of this scene. Like, she does not look like she's having a good time.
And then we get some insight into that from her own mouth in the conversation between the two of them, where she basically says that she finds she has no friends, or few, and that she hates that people only view her as the queen now, not as an actual person.
And she also points out to Rhaenyra that Rhaenyra doesn't understand how things are for everyone else. Like, again, something that I've already pointed out in the show.
Sure.
And to an extent, like, yeah, Alicent's right. Rhaenyra doesn't know what it's like. Rhaenyra is very not the type of person to put herself in someone else's.
Yeah, because she's like lamenting, like, I just couldn't take the tour anymore. And it was just miserable. And then Alicent's like, oh yes, like the most wealthy and powerful men in the realm all fawning over you. That sounds horrible.
Well, and especially like, and we're definitely going to be seeing this throughout the episode. And I think the overarching arc for Alicent, and we've already discussed that she does what she's told. She's dutiful. She listens. She doesn't ask questions. And she just accepts her lot in life. And she sees Rhaenyra do the complete opposite, where Rhaenyra is like, I get to pick everything. It's not fair that I don't get to, that things will be picked out for me. And I'm sure Alicent is very envious of that. And that I have in a particular scene, I want to dive more into it, but I feel like she's starting to see how Alicent has so little freedom and how much freedom Rhaenyra has. And I feel like there's a bubble, like a little bit of resentment bubbling up there. Not quite too much where it's building into anything as of right now, but you can see that she's already having these thoughts of, oh, you're being given so much to
Sure.
You're having opportunities that I was never given. Like, there was never a conversation between, well, at least on camera, there was no conversation. Viserys pretty much just said, I'm going to marry Alicent Hightower. And
right. Which I get the feeling, just, reading her scenes, that she was down for that.
Yes.
But you're right. Like, she did not have even 1% the degree of choice that Rhaenyra has before her.
Oh, for sure.
But at the same time, I find it hard to, like, there is some resentment, I'm sure, but Alicent just, to me, seems like such a pure soul. And I honestly do, at least to this point in the show, feel like she is the most genuinely, like, good, like, selfless person.
Yes.
Selfless character. So I don't know if it's so much that she's growing resentful as it is just making her not so much resentful of Rhaenyra as resentful of her own situation. Because the thing this is as close as, because she has been like extending olive branches, like trying to reconnect with Rhaenyra, but this is basically her begging at this point, like being like, I have no friends. You have come back. Can we please fix things?
Yeah.
She's like, I am so sad.
And especially, I was thinking about it when I was watching the episode. I'm sure that it's more than just people view her as the queen now. How many people think that she probably, like, think that see through Otto's plan? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, oh, she was there immediately after Emma died. She pretty much just comforted him, and like, I'm sure there's all sorts of nasty rumors, and people probably just talk mad shit behind her back, and they're not going to be saying that to the queen, obviously, to her face, but court is where people go to gossip. And I'm sure that that's a hot bit of gossip and nobody wants to get too close to her because they view it almost scandalous.
Yeah.
Again, we don't see any video evidence of that. There's nothing on the show to infer, but just reading between the lines of what goes on in the show, like I'm sure that there's something like that there.
Yeah, and it only gets worse throughout the episode. I mean, I feel bad for Alicent at this point, but yeah, she's the one that actually has some things to be sore about, I think.
And again, like the reason I say resentment towards Rhaenyra, and it's not even like she's having that resentment. It's like the bubblings of it because she sees Rhaenyra not only putting up like getting so much more opportunity than she did, but she's like putting up a stink even when
she's not happy about it.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Like Alicent's over here like, I literally would give up so much just to have 1% of what you're getting here. And it's not that big of a thing, but Alicent does like, well, actually, no, it does relate because I think Alicent, again, this is where a source of where I think Alicent is reminding Rhaenyra or having those feelings of resentment. She's like, well, the king is frustrated. The king is not happy with you. Like she brought that up to Rhaenyra and you could interpret that as just saying, hey, well, you're making some decision here that's not having positive.
Yeah.
But I do like because it's showing that their relationship is coming back together. And Rhaenyra has finally forgiven Alicent. It's only taken her 4 years to do so, but...
Jeez. But yeah, okay, that's 40 minutes into the episode, and we're like 8 minutes into 40 minutes of podcasting for like the first 8 minutes. So unless you have any other scorchers on that one.
No. We can definitely get moving onto it.
Next, so it's sort of like the after the party, Rhaenyra and Daemon have a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Their first since his return. Mm-hmm. And they talk about her situation. Daemon says that marriage is nothing but a political arrangement. He sort of indicates that she should just get it over with and you can do whatever you want like the rest of us. She wonders about that, especially as a woman. Mm-hmm. His other piece of advice is that she do not live in fear, which might just be setting her up for later that evening. Mm-hmm. But she kind of makes a point of like, I'm not living in fear. I wouldn't do that. I'm like you.
And I do think that even though this is a very short conversation, I feel like this conversation has a lot of impact for how the rest of the show is going to be turning out for Rhaenyra. Like a lot of things that Daemon tells her to do, she ends up doing in this.
She takes the advice.
She takes the advice. And it just, again, just shows how close she is with Daemon and just how much of a bond they have there.
Right, because in this scene also they're speaking High Valyrian, which is kind of like their cute thing that they do. You know, they get to flex that muscle, which I'm sure there aren't that many people that speak High Valyrian.
Yes. Well, and they're switching off too. Like that's the part that I was laughing about. Like they'd speak the common tongue and then they'd switch to High Valyrian and they switch back to the common and then they switch back to High Valyrian, just going back and forth.
I actually liked that touch because that is something that I mean, we are uncultured Americans that both only speak this one language that you are hearing us speak now.
Correct.
And, you know, sometimes I even wonder about our ability there. But my polyglot friends, my dual language friends, when they're communicating with somebody who knows multiple languages that they also know, I've noticed that they do that a lot. They're like, oh, well, this is easier to explain in Spanish. So we're just going to like 4 sentences here and then we're back to English. And I don't know, it just felt authentic, and it also reinforces like a special connection that I didn't even necessarily realize was being set up in earlier episodes.
For sure.
Man, that Red Keep, The Godswood set is really nice.
I
and
love it.
I like that they're getting so much use out of it. In this,
Yeah, they keep
this
returning to
season.
it.
I think this scene was actually supposed to be shot somewhere else, and the director chose to do it here. And I'm just like, yeah, just do the whole show there, practically.
I do want to point out one last thing is the scene opens up with Daemon just like soaking in the sun. Like he's standing in the Godswood, and you get that sense that he misses being home in King's Landing is his home. That's where he was born, that's where he grew up. You can tell that he misses it, and he's just sitting there soaking in the sunlight. It's very much a symbol that he's ready to be home. But that scene takes us to the first small council meeting in this episode,
in which Rhaenyra is a sitting member.
She's not pouring drinks.
Did she have an orb, though? I didn't check.
I didn't check either.
Okay, well, you talk, and I'm going to look that up.
The Corlys, immediately after the war with the crab feeder, had sailed home, and they're preparing for him to start causing issues, being his own pirate, essentially. That's what they're concerned about. On top of that, they got news. Old Town let them know that Laena, who was supposed to marry Viserys, is going to be marrying the son of the Prince of Braavos. Braavos being a very powerful house on Essos, and they view that as a very concerning arrangement, potentially causing issues on the mainland. They don't ever come out and say that there's going to be war, but that's very much the inference there.
She has an orb.
She has an orb.
There is an orb in front of her. I don't know what master of what she is, but she's orbed up.
She's got the orbs.
Confirmed.
Um,
On what you're saying, though, I can understand why they would be alarmed by this, because, formidable as the crab feeder was, I would much rather go up against him than Corlys.
Corlys's men, for whatever reason, being on boats, all have plate armor.
I'll tell you what, he's not packing a hammer.
No, he's got the axe spear combo going on there.
Devastating.
And
Does Corlys have a dragon?
No, Corlys is a Valerion.
His house has dragons, but
no, his house doesn't have dragons.
his son has a dragon.
His son has a dragon because his wife's a Targaryen.
Yes.
That's how he got the dragon.
I'm just saying, imagine this dude with a dragon.
If he had, he would be he would have just taken the Iron Throne. He wouldn't have just let there be a council. He would have been like, no, I am the king. You guys are going to be bowing to me. I have a dragon.
The end.
Oh, I don't think it would have been a bad thing for Corlys.
You're saying there would have been a lot more people of color in the original series.
I'm just saying he would have gotten the throne. Like if he was a Targaryen, he would have gotten a throne. But the scene wraps up with an emphasis that the princess needs to be married. Like that's the undertone.
Well, that's what Otto says. He's like, if they make an alliance here, we have to follow suit.
He wasn't even saying if. He's like, there needs to be an alliance with the princess now. It was like, especially with this going on, this throne needs to be secured. There needs that, and there's adding that sense of urgency. And I
don't know if we'd necessarily Rhaenyra seems pretty stone-faced in this episode, but I just like to imagine she was like, oh, some of those guys on the tour weren't that bad, actually.
Shit. And then it takes us to the Queen's quarters, where another baby is crying. I get, even though they have maids and they have servants to take care of the children, it doesn't seem like Alicent is necessarily enjoying motherhood at this point. It hasn't really shown her with any positive situations when she's having her children around.
She takes a dutiful approach to it.
Yes. And
And as we've already established, like at least her oldest is kind of a terror.
Yes, very much so. And Rhaenyra can hear the crying when she's going to talk to the king, which there's a part of me that's like, I get why they're separate rooms, but I also wonder, like, why is there such a difference? Like, there's the king's chambers and then there's the queen's chambers. Like,
a difference in quality, space.
Well, no, like they just have their own separate quarters. Like, you'd think that if they're married, that they just have the one in the same quarters. But
yeah, and it's something that you picked up on the last episode where you mentioned that them tying the knot seems to have formalized their relationship.
yes,
This is, to me, that manifested more overtly.
yes, I definitely feel like, especially knowing where the show's going, that the marriage becomes more of a formal agreement rather than anything. The longer that it's very much the opposite of what Viserys and Emma's relationship appeared to be. Like, and maybe that's the sense that there was no formal portion of actually House Aaron is I'm not going to dive into that, but the very clear differences. And Rhaenyra gets brought into the room and Rhaenyra goes to her own room and she discovers a pack of clothes.
Special
delivery with a note that shows a secret passage in her room, which infers to me that this was either Daemon's room when he was a child, or he just has...
maybe he's got the Marauders map, man. Maybe he knows the whole layout.
Well, that's another thing, a little bit of lore that the show does. Like, again, I understand why the show doesn't do it, but the Red Keep was built by Maegor the Cruel, who was one of the first kings, and he built hundreds of secret tunnels in the castle. And once the castle was complete, he killed all the builders.
Ooh.
Hence one of the reasons he got the name Maegor the Cruel. And only the Targaryens know all the secret tunnels. And that's a big deal in a Game of Thrones because in a Game of Thrones, Varys is the only one who seems to know about all the secret tunnels in the Red Keep, which is another reason why they all hate him, because they're like, they don't know if he's spying on them because he knows all the secret tunnels. Because there's secret tunnels in every single room of the castle.
Man, I love Varys.
He's
like definitely top 5 favorite characters,
yes.
Which is saying something in Thrones.
Later at the end.
Oh, okay. Spoilers for Game of Thrones.
Oh, that's right. You are been warned. There will be spoilers in this episode containing the House of the Dragon, possibly a Game of Thrones. You've been warned nearly 50 minutes into the episode.
Do you want me to like splice that in at the beginning?
Why would I do that? They got the spoiler alert.
Okay, well that's on you then.
No, we probably should.
I'm the one who's of the opinion that our spoiler warning on episode 2 just stands for this entire podcast.
We all have our bits, Austin.
Speaking of, holy shit. Okay, Bryce, after the last episode, called me out because I said in our first record that I was going to take note of a notable first in every episode, which I've been doing.
Yep.
But Bryce called me out. He said, I'm not leaning into the bit hard enough. I'm not going hard enough. I'm going to pause the podcast here to bring up the fact that this episode is a huge first.
It is a huge first.
I wonder what you are about to say it is.
Well, you say first and I'll let you know.
All right. First episode. That was our first episode. Huge first.
Yep.
Second episode. First episode we recorded with the Red Dragon.
Yep.
Tiny first. Third episode, first episode we recorded where I was massively sleep deprived. Medium first. I'm sure that's not the first of those we'll get. This episode is the first piece of content that we are covering directed by a woman.
Oh.
This episode is directed by one Claire Kilner, who is, I think, going to be my girl. Moving forward, she directs a total of 3 episodes this season. And I just have one other little statistic I want to bring up while I'm on this massive tangent. I'm leaning into the bit, just underlining how big of a first this is.
This is a big bit.
And I do just want to sidebar on the sidebar. Looking at our master list, not a lot of pieces of dragon content directed by women. So I let's enjoy them while we get where we get them.
Ladies, do you not like dragons? What do you have against dragons?
Okay, I'm interested to see our listener statistics. We love you all. Anyway, so Claire Kilner, female director.
Female director.
I would like to point out that the last piece of World of Westeros content directed by a woman was in season 4 of Game of Thrones.
That's why season 8 was so bad.
No, it gets worse.
Oh no, let's hear it.
There were no female screenwriters for Game of Thrones past season 3. Coincidence?
Season 4 was still pretty good.
The beginning of the end.
No, I thought you were going to say this is the first episode that we filmed something right before that.
No, this supersedes that on every level. And also, and I'll mention it, like, I'm not done talking about it, but within the episode, but the last thing I'll say right now is that I think that it was critical that this episode be directed by a woman, yes. And I think that it is instrumental in how effective some of the scenes we're about to get to are.
Yes, I fully agree with you there, and will not argue with that whatsoever.
Let more women direct. Good results. And right.
But y'all need to include more dragons.
Oh, yeah, that's just a given.
That's if we're gonna get more of them, we need to.
Dear Hollywood, my list of demands: number 1, more dragons. Number 2, more women.
More women, more dragons.
More women behind the camera and in front of the camera. Women's stories, please.
Women's stories about dragons.
More female dragons. More Saphiras.
More Sophias. More Syraxes.
Where the hell were we in this episode?
She got the Marauders map.
Yeah, okay, so she escapes her chambers,
yes,
without a trace, and she meets who? What? Who was it?
The Rogue Prince.
The King of the Narrow Sea.
And they're both very much incognito, which I'm surprised, like, how incognito they actually are. Like,
yeah. I mean, they don't do the best job keeping it up, but they start with a good effort.
They did. And they head out to the sea, the city. And Rhaenyra, I really get the sense that this was the first time that Rhaenyra has been out in the city without just armed guards or a whole escort, where she's going to and from somewhere. This is probably one of the first times that she's going out. Just with how it was panning and how she was looking at everything. You get the whole pyromancer playing with fire. You get all the food vendors trying to sell food, and she just doesn't comprehend that you have to pay for.
Oh my God. Yeah, that royal privilege.
Yeah. And I just made note, this was her seeing the real world for the first time. Like, this is what life actually is like.
And she's getting one piece of the real world right here, and more to come.
Yes. And she's loving it. Like, she clearly loves this outside world that's not of the realm. And
they go to a show.
Well, first we go back to the king.
Oh, yes.
The king is getting a sponge bath. And again, we're talking about how there's sort of parting ways, but Alicent asks to take the washcloth and starts actually washing off the king, and the king just comments like they do it so much rougher, pretty much like, I like it when you do this. Like,
I like it when you scrub my infected sores.
Yes, but it's not like he told her to. Like, she very much chose, like, sent the servants away. She chose to do it, and again, she's being the dutiful wife.
That's her response to it, though, is she goes, "Thank you, husband."
Yes, and
which
I did
really feels, again, the formal thing between them.
Yes, you can sense that there is a sense of formality that's forming there, but it does take us back to the puppet show, not the puppet show, the play that's being put on.
I want to. Sorry, I'll just drop this in here because it is kind of intercutting between the two.
Yes,
but they do the. There's a shot where Alicent blows out a candle and it cuts back to them.
Yes,
and I mean that's a clear homage to one of the most famous cuts in all of film from Lawrence of Arabia. I don't know if you're familiar.
Not quite.
Anyway, it's masterful. Just anytime that somebody does like a flame, like a match or a candle blowout and cut to it, there's just something about that exact technique that I love every time.
Yeah.
Guarantee. And it's Lawrence of Arabia, which is a great movie that probably everybody should see. I think fans of this podcast would actually enjoy it.
Are there any dragons?
No.
Well, we're not going to be talking.
So,
about
I mean, that is a 9 out of 10 cap.
9 out of 10 cap right there.
But, yeah, if you're looking for a little extracurricular whatever from Austin.
Venture off the narrow path we've set.
Anyway, effective technique. I like to see it. But then it does take us... I'm not sure if that's there or a little later, but around this time. Then we go back to a street show. Well, not a street show, but like a...
It's like a performance.
Yeah.
And you can clearly tell that, one, the people are not a fan of Rhaenyra.
That's the big takeaway from this scene is, I mean, they're kind of shitting on all of the potential successors to the throne.
Yeah.
But Rhaenyra is getting the worst of it.
And I also do want to point out that they made Viserys look like a complete imbecile. Like, every time that they were showing, and again,
Sure.
I know that they were trying to be as provocative as possible, but like in a Game of Thrones, whenever there was even like remotely a show that was criticizing the Lannisters, Cersei would like send people in and kill those people like right away. And I'm not saying that Targaryens aren't doing that, but the fact that they also are willing to, like, the Targaryens are putting up with that sort of shows that their leniency.
Yeah, this Viserys guy, he's just got too much empathy.
Yeah.
He just cares about people too much. His heart's too big.
And again, I get it would upset anybody, but for me, there's a lot of signs where in the last episode, we were talking about how Rhaenyra was becoming, like, she was no longer a child. She's becoming a woman. In this episode, I feel like this episode really was reminding us that she still has like young, like, I don't want to say little girl, but just like young woman vibes. She's still like in a lot of areas immature. She's still like growing up and filling out these responsibilities. And she's like trying to pretend like this doesn't affect her when she's clearly getting upset again.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying she doesn't have a right to do so. She has every right to do so, but she's trying like, oh, I don't care about that. I'm like, you do.
Oh, I think that's her line. She's like, this doesn't matter. I'm going to be queen. And then Daemon's like, actually, public opinion is kind of a big deal.
Coming from the guy who had a night where he just went out and slaughtered all the criminals and castrated it.
Sure, but Daemon, we've already discussed, he like has the capacity in him to inspire.
Oh,
I think
for sure.
that he does have a deeper understanding of like performance and perception
Yes.
and rallying people to your cause.
No, I totally agree. And I actually do believe that action that he took won him a lot of the people of King's Landing. Because I'm sure many of the people in King's Landing were being preyed upon by the people that he either castrated, killed, or maimed.
No doubt.
So he knows how to do public. He knows how just a public image is. And again, you could argue that that's one of the main reasons he didn't want Viserys to come and take the glory, because he wanted that public image of being the hero.
Man, Daemon would have been ridiculous on Twitter.
I'd give him a follow.
Maybe on the burner account.
I'm not retweeting anything. Well, and then she very much is, again, immature, and she ends the scene by acting more like a child and just goes running off. Like,
well, she steals some food.
Was that right then? Or
yes, so
that
right after she leaves, because she has no money. I mean, presumably Daemon does.
She's just taking some food, and and Daemon's like, you have to buy that. And then she like looks over at the guy and then just runs. And Daemon is like, oh, I'll go get her.
Yeah. And so I guess that guy just didn't get paid. But she gets caught running away
by Harwin Strong.
Harwin. We got him.
Yeah, we got the name.
But then he recognizes her and he's like, oh, Princess, don't get caught again.
Yeah, you can sense this very subtle relationship that's starting to build up between the two. Like in the last episode, Harwin was very he was the only one that was visibly
about the boar.
Yeah, he was so into it. He was like hell yeah, while he's skinning a rabbit. And
sure. But this is also sort of not critical, but notable in that she has been placed.
Yes.
At this by somebody who is not a noble. Well, no, he is a noble.
He is a noble.
So, a member of court, as it were, has seen her out and about on this particular night, which there will later be some allegations about.
He's the favorite son of the best man on the King's Small Council. I want to pose this question to you. We get a short scene where obviously the emphasis of this scene was the king had sent a maid to Alicent saying the king wants you in his chambers. But what's going on right before is Alicent appears to be preparing a tea. My question is do you think that that's regular tea, or do you think that that's the moon tea that's famous in the show?
Or what's the thing that the milk of the poppy getting slipped in there?
Milk of the poppy, yeah, that's like opium right there.
Well, she's the queen. I'm sure she could get access.
Oh, I'm sure she could. But in my head, I was wondering if it is it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense for it to be not milk of the poppy. Moon tea, which is just plan B for in Westeros.
Interesting.
Because it's an actual tea that they prepare in the show.
Yeah, because we are introduced to the concept of that in this very episode, albeit later.
Are we introduced? Just kidding.
Unless you okay. You're just I've been aware of Plan B. Plan B teas. Let me tell you. Could be. Interesting fan theory. We won't know. But I also wouldn't be surprised if she is not interested in bearing more children.
Especially with just how... The thing is, we do know that she'll have 2 more kids. That's...
Well, yeah, and also the other thing we learn about the moon tea is that it is very difficult to properly brew.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's no way that she's commissioning the Maester to do this without it getting back to the king.
Yes.
So I think that sort of discredits that theory. But maybe. I mean, it would track with how she seems to be feeling.
Yeah, the only reason I had that thought was just how the scenes had been setting up. She was just barely got done giving the king a sponge bath. She's in her room. She's clearly not happy. is not enjoying being a mother in all the scenes that it's showing. And sure enough, it's taking us to where the king is summoning her to be in the king's presence.
Yeah. In the after hours.
Yes. And when you can just see that she's done. Like she is so fed up. Like
okay, so they have sex.
Yes.
And it's very dutiful, and she is stone-faced.
Yes, like not even pretending.
It very much, like, there is no passion in this at all.
I'll say, like, I wouldn't say at all. There's only one instance, and it may be later on, where the king touches her face, and she does, like, give him a little smile, but that's...
It really does just feel like getting the job done, though. Like, we're trying to get another heir out.
Yeah.
So the king's just gonna do what he has to do to get where he needs to be, and that'll be that.
Here's the thing, though. Like, yes, the actors themselves have a very wide age difference. Alicent is supposed to be like 21 or so, I believe. I'll have to look that up. And the king is at the oldest in his mid-30s at this point, which, yes, is...
See, I know that that's the book. I feel like casting Paddy Considine and what they have... Again, I haven't read the book, but from what I understand, what they seem to have changed about Rhaenyra and Alicent's relationship, I'm more inclined to believe the ages of the actors.
I agree, but I also feel like what the Iron Throne does to the king is it's like the president of the United States. When you see Barack Obama, when he goes into the first year and when he leaves office, there's a clear age difference. Like
he's like the Matt Damon aging into his older self and Saving Private Ryan.
Exactly. And I really think that, yes, Paddy... Considine, like, there is that age difference, but I also feel like they're trying to show the Iron Throne has been so stressful, and it does age him because, spoiler alert, King Viserys dies at 56.
In the canon?
Yes.
Like the book?
In the canon, he dies at 56. I looked that up. I wanted to know that age. He's dead at 56, and he still has, like, adult children that are adults that haven't been born yet, that are, like, later on in the show.
Yeah.
So we know that he's, like, again, he's aging because of the throne. He's aging because he is getting all sorts of skin issues with the throne tearing him up. I'm not saying that he's not every girl's wildest dreams. That's all I'm saying. I know that. I'm not trying to defend it, but it's not like he's this 45-year-old man that's with...
Oh, okay. I mean, I would split the difference with you. Like, I could see that they're casting an older actor because it's like, he's supposed to read older, not necessarily be older. But I also think that it's a deliberate choice to age up the character.
For sure.
I think it's both.
But especially if we look at how he looked in the first episode and how he looks now, you can already see a difference.
That's a bigger indication to me.
And it's only been 4 years. And, like, if you just look at the hair, his hair is so lush in the first episode, and it is thinning out. Half of which is Rhaenyra's fault.
She is his political headache.
I love it. We're getting ahead of ourselves. And this next scene, again, I alluded to this being Game of Thrones. Like, this next scene, when they're going through the brothel, like, this is almost like what made Game of Thrones famous. Like,
is it episode 4 of the first season where Littlefinger's, like, talking about how to please a man, and there's just, like,
an unnecessarily long...
Yeah, it's kind of gratuitous.
Yes.
Am I right? Is that
I think it is. We'll double check and see, but I believe it's episode 4 that he's...
Okay, so we leave a little moment for a correction. Yeah, I was wrong. This is Austin from the future. The episode we are referring to is Season 1, Episode 7. The episode with the most sexually explicit scene, certainly in season 1 of Game of Thrones, but perhaps in the entire series, is in season 1, episode 7. That's for all you sticklers and sickos out there. Now, back to the podcast. Okay, hopefully we got it.
Hopefully we got it.
I just remember because that was the episode because one of my friends' parents had the DVD box sets of Game of Thrones. And so we kind of watched them in turn. So it's like one friend would get the set and then like watch through it or like the first season and then like the other would pick up behind him. And I was the last person in the friend group to watch the original series. And it was very much that like teenage energy of like, dude, just wait for episode 4.
Because
shit's wild.
It is a long scene. It is a graphic scene. But you're getting a lot of the same vibe in this situation where they're going through the brothel. They're seeing they're seeing people on drugs. They're seeing people drunk. And also, mind you, both Daemon and Rhaenyra are drinking throughout their little excursion. I think that's quite important to point out as well, that they're...
Yeah, alcohol involved for sure. But I do want to point out that this is just a wonderful bit of juxtaposition to put this scene again, like after the scene with Alicent and Viserys having the least passionate sex maybe ever shown in television.
You have duty and then you have passion. You have one scene that strictly is like, we are doing this for the realm, while this is like, we could destroy the realm if this gets out.
Yeah, and then Daemon has his line where he's like, fucking is a pleasure, you see, for the woman as it is the man. So it's like him like underlining like the pleasure of this, the indulgence, the hedonism.
Yes. I do want to point out there's one scene before like they do their whole walkthrough where Daemon is like either at a bar or he's at a window and he just does not look well. Like he has like major, like, I don't know if it was just the particular lighting, but the look on his face is like almost like he has a sickly look. He has crazy bags under his eyes. Like, I don't know if you remember catching that scene or not, but he doesn't look like, there's one scene in particular that he just doesn't look well. And to me, that's just saying that even he doesn't feel 100% all in with what he's doing right now.
Oh, you mean in the brothel?
Yeah, in the brothel.
Oh, okay. Right. I'm with you. Because should I progress?
Yeah,
okay.
Let's keep it going.
So they're taking this little venture through all sorts of activities going on in this brothel. It's a madhouse, man. And actually, there's a quote from let me get her name. Oh yeah, Millie Alcock, who is Rhaenyra's actress.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to the New York Post, she's like, apparently they, before filming the scene, hadn't seen any of the extras, which I think is a pretty smart move on behalf of the director.
Yeah.
Again, good job, Claire. To where especially Rhaenyra seems like, oh my, like throughout that whole scene.
Like, it's very much the oh my, but she's also like, she's
the fascination.
It's the outside world. It's not what she's used to. And I do think it's worth noting that there are some ladies that seem to be workers in this establishment that notice Daemon and I think recognize Daemon. I don't know if they recognize Rhaenyra, but he does take her hat off, exposing that luscious...
Indeed, the Targaryen locks.
So people at least, I think, know Daemon's there. It could be argued about Rhaenyra, but some of the ladies of the night
Yeah. But so what happened? And this is, I think we're kind of hesitating to say it out loud, but Daemon and Rhaenyra reach a particular room where there's a lot of freaky stuff happening.
There's an orgy.
And there's some line about like taking what you want, and then they start to get it on.
Yeah. Daemon was, as the kids say, risen it up.
You want another take on that? I'm kidding.
No, Daemon had a lot, like, Daemon very much is a high charisma character. Like, he has a lot, like, he knows what to say. I don't know. I think wisdom is the only stat that he's low on right now. Like,
yeah, but also, so that again, the central tension of this episode is what is Daemon doing?
Yes.
Like, what's going on in his head? I feel like going into this evening, he very much had the intention of reaching this moment with Rhaenyra. I mean, there's some foreshadowing of it in their conversation in the Godswood.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's him who like initiates this, like he leaves the secret message for her to come out where they can be alone.
Yeah.
And presumably he is like leading the entire endeavor. So not a great look on Daemon's part. I mean, incest thing aside, like this is Game of Thrones, you basically take it out of the equation. Targaryen, no less.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like he's trying to get it on with his 18-year-old niece. And it seems like sober-brained Daemon was sort of designing this moment. What do you think?
I definitely do think that that's the case. Like, I am not going to be defending him at all. There's a part
the Daemon defending ends now.
The line was drawn. I'm not passing over it. I do almost wonder if because there has been they've been flirting, they've been like testing the edges. There's a part of me that wonders if Daemon was trying to see if this is something that Rhaenyra was reciprocating, if like how she felt.
This sounds like a little bit of Daemon defending.
It's not Daemon defending. It's wrong. He shouldn't have been doing that. But this was also his chance to be like, okay, is she just being a flirt or
He's testing the waters?
Yes, because he clearly is not happy with his marriage. He has made that very clear whenever his wife gets brought up. He might be trying to find a way to get out of that marriage or just change up the rules a bit of it there.
Perhaps. But I will point out, so the progression of the scene, they start to get it on. I mean, she like pulls her pants down, like it's happening.
Yep.
And then there's kind of a moment where she like turns back around and like goes to kiss him, where suddenly everything shifts for Daemon.
Yeah. And
there's kind of an awkward moment, like there's clearly the gears are turning in his head and he stops things.
Yep.
So that to me sort of discredits what you're saying there, to where he might be trying to gauge her interest in this, in that the moment where she more overtly starts to display that, he can't hack it. He's like, I'm not the man anymore. I'm not running this. This is weird and I'm done.
Yes. And I get that, but I also he knows she's interested now. And he could be trying to defend. Again, I'm not defending him. Like, what am I doing? I'm not trying to defend him. But he's also doesn't want, like, it's considered defilement. And they all, like, he knows how they view women in the world of Westeros, that it's a very different standard for men. That very much could have been there. Again, I'm not trying to defend Daemon. Either way, he leaves. Like, he ends it. But
I want to dig into this moment a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that maybe you have some perspective on it too. So watching the scene this time, it read to me like probably two things happening in Daemon's head. In this moment, one, he doesn't like that she's so into it. Two, he sees her face, and maybe that causes a little bit more reflection, makes the moment a little more real for him.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe at that point he's like, I can't do this to my brother, or whatever. Watching some of the interviews in the Inside the Episode thing that they do at the end. See, and this didn't read to me in the actual episode, but multiple interviews indicate this, which to me feels like this was probably in the script and did not necessarily get fully translated to the audience.
Yeah.
But they say that he can't get it up. It's like the scene in the first episode where he can't finish with the whore.
Yeah.
Or sorry, whore. The lady of the night.
The slut.
All right. But that's what Millie Alcock said in hers, and then I think Miguel Sapochnik made comments to the same effect, which sort of changes the scene. I mean, I'm all for just taking a scene for like what the information it actually gives you in there, but to think that it's like, okay, she turns around and that the reason that he stops is because he physically cannot proceed at that point, whether that's because of any of the reasons that I said are actually causing impotence, it changes the scene because it's no longer a choice.
Yeah. The only pushback, and again, I don't want to dive too much into it, is we get very clear evidence that he's not completely impotent later on in the show. Like, there are several visual representations that he is not incapable. And
maybe he's just specific.
Possibly. But I don't know. Like, I just have like I believe it because I know we talked about it before, and maybe they have like Westerosi Viagra somewhere out there, and he just didn't have access to that night. But I also I don't know. Like,
so again, I am inclined to just take what I see in the scene, and I also think that that's. Again, I'm not saying Daemon's like a good guy.
No,
like, I am not condoning any of this. But I think it makes for a more interesting character for him to have made a choice there.
Yeah.
And also that's how it read in the scene. I felt like I should bring that up because it sort of changed my perception, not necessarily for the best, which again, that makes me think like the director was really on the ball and making some smart decisions in this.
Yeah.
But it also does like kind of color my interpretation. So I wanted to know what you thought was going on in his head there based on all the information that I had.
I will also, if it's one thing to hear it from Millie Alcock and from the other person, but I also know that Matt Smith has, I don't want to say issues, but he has some disagreements with how the writers wrote Daemon up. There's some particular things, we'll get into them later, but there's some inconsistencies that in Daemon's character. And yes, Daemon's a very inconsistent character, but there's some very notable inconsistencies later on in the show. But is there anything else that we want to necessarily cover?
That scene, geez, I hope not. Pivotal scene. Really big, and I'm glad we took a moment on it, but I think that's where I'm at with it. Like, Daemon's not a great guy, but he also ultimately made the choice to not go through with it.
Yes.
Even though Rhaenyra was down. And at the end of the scene, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's worth noting that a particular line that Daemon was saying to Rhaenyra before he storms off was, but that doesn't stop us from doing what we want. That was said while Alicent was in bed. Like, he was saying it, but it was showing Alicent
Intercut.
the intercut. Just again showing the stark differences between the two, and just the very much different lives that Rhaenyra and Alicent are living.
Totally.
And I thought that was very well done.
So Daemon leaves, and Rhaenyra, hood down, out of disguise, says out loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, Daemon!
Daemon! And she goes running off, and a little bird seems to see her.
Oh. This is a creepy kid.
It is. And I do, I want to get back to that. The next scene is Alicent just laying in bed with the king, and she's staring up, and even though you can tell she's not happy, I can't particularly read what she's feeling. I can't tell if it's regret. I can't really read if she's if it's contemplation. I can't really tell what's on her face other than she's clearly not happy.
It feels like depression to me. It's like an emptiness.
Okay.
More than anything. It's just that overwhelming sadness, like a void within her, because her situation is inescapable.
Yeah. And I low-key loved when Rhaenyra came back to the castle and she's passing Criston Cole.
He's doing the Vincent Vega, like
because you could tell that he was falling asleep at the post, and then she's storming to her room, and he's like, princess.
yeah
Nothing is he can tell nothing is crucially wrong, but he's so overtly confused. And he's and that's when the Rhaenyra is clearly angry. She's not, it's not that she's upset, she is angry. The way she was storming in,
she got blue balled.
And she stormed into her room, and Criston Cole is trying to talk to her. She's not talking back, and so he makes I'm gonna go alert the Lord Commander, who is Sir Westerling, who we've already determined is a stickler for the rules.
Yeah. She's like, no.
No. She immediately is none of that.
And then she gets an idea.
Some would say a drunken idea.
A beautiful idea.
A beautiful idea, and she steals Sir Criston Cole's helm.
Yes, she's playing a little game.
Yes, and again,
with this beautiful man.
He is an attractive man.
It's a knight in shining armor in every sense.
Yes. And she very much is, you can tell she's very riled up. She is very much being playful. She's flirting with him. And Sir Criston Cole is still just being very stern. He's just princess, give it here. And eventually Rhaenyra kisses Sir Criston Cole.
Yeah, she pulls off a pretty sly little move with the helmet. She's like, you want it? And then swipes it out and leans in.
Yes.
And they kiss.
Yes. And Sir Criston Cole asks her to stop trying to be the dutiful knight that he is. And instead, she starts removing his plate armor, which they made it seem like would it take that long to remove plate armor?
Yeah, I read that as a time jump.
Oh, it definitely was, but I just, that it wasn't just 5 minutes taking that.
No, but on that, it is kind of encouraging because I love everything about this scene.
Yeah.
This is my favorite scene in the episode, and maybe that makes me a little bit of a sicko, just a little bit. But I love a well executed, passionate, tender sex scene.
Yes.
When it's on this level, and there's something to setting the stage there that's really encouraging in that we know I mean, they devote some screen time to it, but the time it would take to disrobe him is encouraging to think like, okay, even a drunken Rhaenyra has a minute here to think about this and really decide this is truly what she wants. And the same for Cristen.
And just going back to the last episode, they had built a closeness and fondness for each other. They were friends. Like she confided in him. Like it's very much an established thing there. And my personally, like, I love just seeing the confliction on Sir Criston Cole's face, especially when he was when he took off the white cloak and he's holding it in his hand, like almost like he doesn't want to let it go, but he's like slowly walking and he just has this look of like complete shame on his face, essentially.
Yeah. Well, he took an oath, presumably as a knight.
Took a oath as a king's guard.
To what's that specifically?
So the Kingsguard are modeled off of the Night's Watch. They take no land, they take no wives, they father no children.
What a bummer.
That was not exactly the best. Now, there are several knights in the Kingsguard that have interpreted the rules accordingly. Some knights believe like, oh, because of that, you can't have sex. It's celibacy. There's other knights that are like, I can have concubines. Like that's totally okay. So, and it also does depend on what the king decides. Now, for Sir Criston Cole, I don't know what's necessarily going through his head other than he knows that he should not be having sex with the princess that he is supposed to protect. Like that is...
Sure.
He is sworn to the king first.
Okay,
like
yeah.
He's the king's guard.
But it's also, from a sex positive perspective, regardless of like the duty there, this is very clearly something that they both want.
Yes.
And I saw that as kind of the metaphor of him like taking off his armor, is that he's like also like releasing himself from all of these like protections that he's like the armor he's put over his heart, I guess you could say.
Yes, but at the same time, how would we react if we found out that the president had a daughter who was sleeping with a Secret Service agent? Because that's essentially the closest.
You're right, but also we have the whole story, and I think it's beautiful.
Hey, beautiful stories often end up tragic.
Hey, case in point. Tune in next week.
And again, there is just that sense of passion that's going on in this scene. He doesn't, like, Sir Criston Cole doesn't necessarily look happy throughout the scene, but he clearly wants this. Again, it's that conflict that he's feeling. I'm not saying that he's not enjoying himself. I'm not saying that he's not happy to be doing it, but like you've said, he has worked towards this his entire life. He is the Olympian, and now he's doing something that could potentially jeopardize that for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And he plays it pretty well. Yeah. The actor, shout out Fabian Frankel. Love the alliteration on that one.
Fabian. Well, anything else that you want to discuss with this scene?
They make sweet, passionate love, and the music is wonderful.
Good soup.
It's so tasteful. And we do get like that angle of Kristen's perspective here, like the conflicted. But I would say that this scene and the one prior with in the brothel with Daemon, is more of a female perspective, which I really appreciated. And that's what I'm getting at when I say that it's critical that this was directed by a woman, because it shows.
No, I completely agree with that. And showing all this beautifulness, showing all this passion, showing on all this, what do they decide to do with the next scene but show us with our dear friend Otto?
Devastating cut.
And Otto, there is a very familiar young boy that's at the gate, and the guards say that there is a message from the White Wyrm.
The White Wyrm.
Which I feel a little guilty because we have already alluded to who the White Wyrm is, but we are not necessarily supposed to know who the White Wyrm is as of right now. But we get the morning after, and
we do.
Our boy Daemon. Now, here's the thing. I'm conflicted. Is he strictly just hung over, or was he drugged? Like,
drugged by who?
I don't know. Like, I've been hung over before. He seemed a little more than just hungover. Now I know they're drinking that good stuff, like that. Good
I could also
medieval.
have seen, the rest of his night that we were not privy to being a little more heavy on the drink,
just drowning himself.
Yeah, because he's obviously not feeling good about that whole situation. I mean, that's what the look on his face read to me. So
yes,
I could chalk it up to that.
I do want to point out that we see that same young boy, though, come back in and give Lady Misery, who is Lady Mysaria, some money.
Yep.
And
so it's the same kid that noticed Rhaenyra and Daemon leaving the brothel, that then reported to Otto on behalf of the White Wyrm, then is taking the money he got paid from Otto and giving it to Mysaria.
And we're assuming at this point that she is the White Wyrm, even though we know she is the White Wyrm from previous conversations. But I'll just leave that there. I did like obviously the quote that she gave Daemon was meant for something more ominous that was coming forward, but I also sort of like to imagine that it was sort of being used for how he was feeling at the moment, where she was like, hard lessons are not learned but suffered. Like,
amen.
So there's a part of me that's like, okay, she's saying that to Daemon, but I also know she's saying that about what's about to go down. Because the next scene we see Otto,
but before we say that, I do want to comment that just because we sort of tore into it in her last appearance, the accent, it's still there. It's not as bad in this scene for me.
Bad.
Again, still not feeling that decision fundamentally. But this does feel like them sort of reacting to how that other scene turned out and toning it down a little bit. I mean, hopefully this is her like one step like into phasing it out over the course of this show. But it's not as bad in this scene, and I am grateful for that.
It's still not good.
It's still a little distracting. It's just all relative.
Yeah. But the next scene, we see Otto, and you can tell he does not want to give the news that he has received. He is clearly very conflicted, which, I mean, you would think that he was just we don't know the information, but he was just given some juicy gossip that could really help Aegon.
It's kind of a silver bullet if properly deployed.
Yes, but I also think he knows that this could go very, very poor. Like, he has to use the silver bullet to shoot the heart, otherwise this ain't working.
Well, that's always you assuming the worst of Otto.
Well, no, I can tell when you see his face, he does not look like he wants to tell the king before he goes in. Like, he very much has a conflicted look, and
but you're outlining that has just as much to do with him worrying about it backfiring as for any genuine love for the king.
He doesn't care. We know he doesn't care for the king.
I think
it gets alluded that he killed the king's father. You think that he cares for the king?
All right. Otto hater. You're about, you got what you wanted, didn't you?
we haven't got there yet. But he does go to the king. And again, it's not easy for him to express this. But he also, you can tell that he needs to tell the king this. And I loved how Viserys was like just not cluing in at all.
No, I love his whole like because Otto was like, she was spotted outside her chambers, and he's like, yeah.
Well, even
in a brothel.
Well, even yeah, he's like, he didn't care that she was in a brothel. Like, it wasn't until Daemon got brought up that he really started to get upset. Like,
and even then, he's like, it's not true, lies.
Yeah, but to me, like, it's funny that he just didn't care that Rhaenyra was in a brothel. Like, like to me, that was like, oh well. Like, I don't know what he would be thinking. Like,
he's a cool dad.
He's
probably thinking about what he later says to Daemon, where he's like, well, when I was her age, I worked my way through every brothel in the city.
Yeah.
So I can cut her a little slack until up to a point.
Till a point. And then once it's laid out, Viserys gets probably the most angry that we've seen since the heir for a day was brought up, or when since the dragon egg was stolen.
Yeah, I think that tracks.
And he is starting to go a little crazy. Something I do find very interesting, though, is because he wants the name. He's like, I want who told you this to come here, and I will gouge their eyes. Like, he is like, this is the big Targaryen energy that the dragon has been woken.
Sure, yeah.
Something that I find interesting is that Otto says that his source is very trusted and has not let him down yet, which infers to me that Lady Mysaria has been working for Otto for some time. It's not just a short, like...
Well, I mean, it could be as much as a few years. How long has she been in King's Landing?
Well, she went with Daemon to Dragonstone.
Okay, but did she return with him just now?
We don't know. We don't know if she went back. We don't know if he went to the Stepstone. I don't assume. We don't know. We just don't know what was going on. I assume that since she had the whole conversation that she wants to be protected, that she wouldn't go to a war zone with Daemon. But at the same time, I could see that she would want to keep Daemon around to be her protector. But still, we don't know how long she's been working for Otto.
But it could be as much as a few years.
It could be. It could be since before they left. Like, she could have been the informant at Dragonstone
there's a thought.
For Daemon. Again, I don't know. Not sure what's going on there. I loved, again, yes, this I loved it all. I loved it all. And like, to me, this shows that the king clearly knows what Otto is up to, because he says, are you so sick with ambition that you will have my daughter stalked, awaiting your best chance to destroy her reputation? Like, he knows that he's an ambitious man. Like, it's not passing by on him. And like,
yeah, to his credit.
Yeah, he's not completely blind to it. I just wish that he could have been a little more noticeable.
Yeah, maybe it shouldn't have taken it becoming a family matter for him to take action.
Yes. I also made note, Otto knows he's on thin ice, doesn't push his luck with anything, and he leaves. And I also thought it was worth noting that the king refused to talk to Alicent, who was listening in on this conversation.
Yes.
Like,
still there from the night before, which does indicate like I mean, after that, again, totally passionless sex scene, that she stayed the night makes me think, okay, maybe the spark's not totally out, but this could also just be them setting up for the relationship to sour even further in future episodes.
Yes.
But the point of Alicent got the intel. She got it early
Yes.
just because she was there.
Yes.
Which leads to, am I right in that?
Kristen Cole looking very guilty delivering a
Yes. Okay, so there's that buffer scene where Kristen comes up and she's still being kind of flirty with him, and he's like, "The Queen wants to see you."
She's like, the Queen.
Which presumably he probably thinks it's about that.
Yeah, like he probably is thinking his time.
He's shitting bricks.
Yes, and they go to the Godswood. Like
A return to the Godswood.
Yes, the Godswood seems to be Alicent and Rhaenyra's place. That's
Totally.
it's very significant to them. And I got a lot from this scene in particular.
Great scene.
It's a great scene. And Alicent wasted no time asking Rhaenyra if it was true. If she had slept with Daemon.
And Millie Alcock plays the deception of this scene so well.
She was rolling that 20s.
The character and the actress.
Those deception rolls.
And I've been singing their praises, both of them, Emily Carey and Millie Alcock, throughout the season so far. But I do think that this episode and this scene in particular are like the crowning achievement of both of their performances.
Yes.
And again, like if you want to grade it on like the young, because I think Millie is actually like 22 when this episode came out, playing 18.
Yeah.
But still, that's pretty young to be coming with these chops.
For sure.
And it's like a fine line of she is a human being acting as somebody who is telling a lie, but not totally like pulling it off.
Yes.
Like you can hear kind of in her voice as it catches, she's like, "This is a vile accusation."
And I want to make note, I don't like, and again, this is probably very obvious, but I don't think Alicent is pissed about the situation. I think she's pissed that there's just so little excitement / passion / whatever she wants in her own life. And this is, again, she sees Rhaenyra throwing all of her responsibilities to the side, saying, "No, I do what I want," and nothing happening out of it. And Alicent is probably like very furious. Like, I want just even a slice of that.
Yeah, as her dedicated rule follower, like personality.
Yeah,
just that to see somebody so blatantly go against that, I'm sure just really grinds her gears.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I've seen it where people that are rule followers like that following it, when they see other people not following the rules.
Yeah, they're like, well, what am I following the rules for?
Yeah, and
what's any of this about?
But it's not even about like them. It's about like them getting angry at the other person for not following the rules, when in reality, they're just upset because they have to follow the rules or doing that. And it's like Alicent tries to play it off like, "Oh, I'm doing this for you. I'm concerned about you." And to a level, I'm sure she is. But I think that's where more of this is coming from, is that she just is angry that she can't live the way that she wants to live.
Sure.
And,
the scene plays out. Did you have more on it?
No, it seemed like at first Rhaenyra was just playing white lies. She was just saying, "Oh no, I didn't sleep with Daemon."
She's only admitting, she's only letting up as much ground as she has to, moment to moment.
But then, like, she straight up just says, like, "My virtue is still intact." Like,
well, that's the thing, because she's like, Oh, does she say that?
Yes.
Well, because Alicent later relays that to.
No,
So she says she's still a maiden?
Rhaenyra still says that essentially said she did not have sex.
Well, no, because she says in the brothel nothing happened. I was only a spectator. I wish I'd reviewed the tape more closely.
She does at one point say that she's still a maid, though. Like, because I do make note that she just flat out lies at one point, saying that she did not have sex.
Okay.
Because I know that that's gonna be a big deal that she comes out and lies in that particular way.
Shame on you, Rhaenyra.
And again, like, even though Alicent is, I had that whole thing where Alicent's more upset because she feels so trapped. She still does try to play the motherly role of like taking care of Rhaenyra and being concerned.
Even in this moment, it feels like she's in her corner.
Yeah,
that's the funny thing.
Yeah. And then our boy makes his triumphant return.
Yeah, and it's a sort of a mirrored encounter where the other half of this, Daemon is brought before the king in the throne room, and this is where the real dragon comes out.
Oh, first of all, the king's fit. I don't know if you recall, but just
he's looking good.
He looks good.
I mean, as good as that body can look.
Well, and he was as agile as ever, because he starts just kicking. He starts off with kicking Daemon.
Yeah.
And he's, again, I don't really understand why Daemon lies and says that he did sleep with Rhaenyra. Like, that's...
Well, it's, I'm inclined to think it's as Alicent later says. It's one, to humiliate the king, because I think that's sort of becoming his new motivation within this terribly complex character. Also, I think whether by design or whether by design from the very beginning or more him taking advantage of how things played out, I think he is genuine in his marriage proposal.
See, I'm leaning more towards that, but I also think that he knows it wouldn't have flown with him having, like, if he wasn't married at that point, maybe. Like, I could see that happening if he wasn't married, but he's still married, which to me...
Which it's not the first time that he's brought up the, like, plural marriage thing.
Yes.
Again, maybe he's just kind of specific.
I do believe, though, that he knows that that's not going to fly, because plural marriages in the world of A Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, are typically reserved for the king rather than...
Okay, fair point. But, I mean, he's not trying to hide it there, that he's like, well, if I was to do that, like, if we were to marry, then she could remain the heir, technically. Like, you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 there, and he would be the king, the next up king, as it were.
Yeah.
So there's room there. Also, as part of the play, that if he doesn't deny that they had sexual relations, that he sullied her, as it were, that would then create a situation where he is the most ideal suitor for her.
Yes.
Because they've already done it. Oh, that is a no-go. Kind of fixes the situation if they get married anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. I still am confused about it. I think you're right that it's just a play for them to get married. But to me, like, yes, it was premeditated, at least that day. But that shows that whole thing wasn't premeditated longer than that day. Because you'd think if it was a more premeditated...
He would have gone through with it?
He would have ended his other marriage first.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because it'd make a lot more sense for that if he wasn't married Like, I could see the king probably wasn't going to do it, but the king would be more inclined to do it if that's the case. But Daemon, I think, achieves a new accomplishment in being the most banished guy.
2 for 2, baby.
Who's been banished twice from King's Landing?
And it's like he was gunning for it, man. Dude got banished within like 48 hours of getting back. What a scoundrel.
And then the king and queen meet up. They are sharing what they've discussed. And it's just ironic that both the people they talked to lied to them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's funny to think about that they both like were lied to, but
Yeah.
there's not really a way to do that. The next scene, I think, is a very significant scene as well. Like, that's
Between the two of them?
no. Well, is there anything else that you want to discuss?
Not really. I don't have notes on that. That other than, again, Alicent was like, well, he could have not denied it because then he humiliates you. He diminishes you. Which I think is a valid possibility.
It's valid. I think it's more of the latter one that we discussed, but I still think it's valid. But Rhaenyra going to the king's chamber. She is, I think this is the most visibly nervous going to see her father that we've seen. She is clearly...
Yeah, and this is a big scene.
Yeah.
This is kind of, it's not the like, it's not the fireworks of the episode, but this really is like the culmination, like the ultimate effects of the episode made clear.
Yes. And we also have to remind ourselves, like, Rhaenyra has just been repeatedly upsetting her father. Like, for the last 24 hours. She returned home early from the suitors that she spurned.
Strike one.
She went out with Daemon to the brothels.
Strike 2, 3, 4.
And to top it all off, she knows that she had sex with one of the king's guards, and she doesn't know if the king knows that or not.
Strike 18.
And they go in.
She's going in with an empty pistol.
Yes. And she goes in, and the room appears empty. Like, I actually really like that. It's almost more ominous that he's...
Yeah, well, I mean, he doesn't want any ears on this conversation.
No. And the dagger is being heated up in the brazier, and the king is talking, and the king appears and is talking. Makes me wonder if he used one of those secret passages that's for dramatic effect. Just
the best use.
And
honestly.
And he says that on the blade it says, "From my blood comes the prince that is promised. His will be the song of ice and fire."
So this being Jaehaerys's blade, right? Or
Aegon's
blade.
Aegon
passed directly to Viserys?
It's handed king to king. So when in the first episode, Viserys says that this is like really, like, Aegon had a prophecy dream, and this dagger almost represents like the king passing that knowledge down to the next king so that they know about the prophecy. So I like that because Viserys isn't coming in completely just daggers out. He's like coming in like, hey, we're destined for more. Like, this is important.
Yeah, he's like, all right, we're going to have a conversation, but a little context here.
It's like, we're better than everyone. And the burden of knowledge, I think that was brought up at one point. And he was just talking about that. And then he comes in swinging and calls Rhaenyra out, pretty much saying that Rhaenyra is not taking any of her responsibilities seriously. She's not.
And to be clear, Viserys, I think, has all the high ground in this conversation.
Yes,
like that's the reality that this episode has set up.
Yes,
and he like even admits to Rhaenyra when she's like, well, you haven't even got my side of it yet. And he's like, well, it doesn't really matter because like, it's like Alicent said earlier, she shouldn't have been in that situation.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't have been possible to even start that rumor.
Like, yeah, there's like her side of it doesn't matter because the fact that that information is there, like, and again, it just shows to me that Rhaenyra isn't ready. Like she's not, she doesn't understand how things work.
She's not showing it.
And it's just so sad because the first 3 episodes we were saying the king is not giving her an opportunity to show that she's ready. She's not giving like chances. But when she gets the chances, she royally is just like dropping the ball at every angle.
Yeah. A royal fumble. I'm with you.
And the king is calling her out and eventually says that she will marry Rhaenyra Valerian. And
Well, hold up, because you are glossing over the fact that he says to her face directly that Jaehaerys would have disinherited her.
yes.
But he does not have that luxury. This indicates he wants to disinherit her. He is rescinding his support for her as heir. He's like, okay, you're still the one because you have to be for the sake of the realm. Because again, it feeds into like, he's like, the White Walkers or whatever are coming, so I can't risk tearing the kingdom apart by changing my mind now. But him telling her that he no longer approves of her as heir is devastating.
I didn't interpret it as he doesn't completely approve of her because technically he can still pick Aegon. I think it's more that he's choosing to go with Rhaenyra, one for the legacy of Emma. But I do agree that this is very much tainting that. Like it's not the like, oh, she's obviously the choice. But yes, like he's very much disapproving.
Well, knowing where the season goes, I think this is sort of setting her up to feel like desperate to reclaim that.
Yes.
Like I think this is the seed of her being like, no, I am the one. Like I need to earn it.
Yes. I think he sets that fire underneath her and he pretty much says, okay, as your punishment, you lost the right to choose. Like, again, I think is very, as far as punishments go.
She's had so many chances. And she even gets a counter offer in that he agrees to.
Like that, yes, that, like, the fact that she's able to, like, do a counter offer to me shows, like, yes, he still is, like, has that soft spot for her. But
I mean, she does play it pretty well, though. Like, she doesn't, when she gets this news, she probably saw it coming, but it doesn't get a big rise out of her. She's like, very well.
Well, you're going to use me as a political.
Okay, yeah.
Like, but it also, as far as husband,
she doesn't push back on it, is the point.
And as we discussed earlier, Rhaenyra Valerian is very much not the worst option that's out there. Not the worst bachelor to end up with in like.
So I don't know if this is. Yes, you're right. I mean, maybe that's just her whole thing going into this is like, worst case scenario, I end up with that guy. He's all right. I've seen the portrait. But one of the producers of the show, he pronounced it Laner. And I don't know if that's accurate. I'm going to be watching it. But in one of the interviews, he said Laner, which doesn't totally line up with the spelling, but I just find very funny.
That's like how you say it in the deep south, Laner.
Maybe that's all it is.
And Rhaenyra does try to sass a little bit to her father. Like, even though she's in this situation, I don't think she really understands what she's done because she's never upset her father to this point. And it's mentioned in the first season of A Game of Thrones, but it's much bigger in the books. The Targaryens have a phrase that when they get like particularly angry, like almost like uncontrollably angry, their term is they woke the dragon. Like that's like Dany has nightmares of when she woke the dragon of her brother, Viserys. I think he is Viserys as well. But he's becomes like uncontrollably angry and will like beat her or just be emotionally abusive. I get the sense that Rhaenyra woke the dragon here in Viserys, and she was sassing her and made the line of like, I'm not gonna be like your political, like, oh, I'm just solving your political headache, or
And then he says,
the beggar, you are my political headache, which
got her.
just it just slapped it. And Rhaenyra, I think, resigns herself to her fate, but she does the best thing.
One condition.
She does the best thing she could have done.
With her dying breath.
She calls out Otto. She calls Otto a vulture, which I put in my notes. He is.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth mentioning that this is the first time that we hear that Otto has served two kings as Hand of the King. He served Jaehaerys at the end of his reign, and he served Viserys all throughout this reign. And Rhaenyra demands that Otto is removed as part of
the exchange, yeah.
And it seems that he goes along with it, which one of the reasons that I think he does go along with it is he knows that this information, like, he can see Otto's ambition. He can see that he's trying to do it. Plus, it's not helpful for somebody to have this information on
yeah,
the next heir. And I think it's a message in a lot of ways to Otto, like saying, you crossed a line here, you can't be doing this. And this is almost like strike one, there's not going to be a strike two. Don't fuck with me. Because we get Otto summoned to the small council meeting area.
To the small council chamber, yes. And I'm just gonna let you handle this because I assumed that you were grinning ear to ear.
I loved it.
This scene, Christmas morning.
I loved how nervous Otto was. Okay, first of all, how do we pronounce his name? Rhys Ifans?
No, it's Rhys Ifans.
Rhys Ifans. I mean,
give it up.
He's great. He's a great actor. I love what he's done with the character because I hate Otto so much. I hate him. He's so despicable. And I just love how like concerned and like nervous he was. And just how he, like when Viserys comes out, he's 5 days. That's how he starts the conversation.
Well, he's totally taking control of the conversation from the get-go.
Which he doesn't really do with Otto. I don't think we've seen him do.
It's not Viserys' style, especially not with his hand.
And he mentions that his father was the hand before Otto, and that he was hand for only 5 days before his stomach burst. And I did a little bit of research, like looking at his wiki for Balon the Brave, Rider of Vhagar, heir to the Iron Throne, and dead of a burst belly. He was like Daemon. The public viewed him how they view Daemon, maybe even a little bit more of a holy figure because he didn't have a lot of the baggage that Daemon had. But he was a strong fighter. He was very charismatic, very gifted, and a very well-known dragon rider. And he rode Vhagar, which is, there was only one other dragon larger than Vhagar, and that was Balerion. So,
yeah, well, isn't Vhagar still around?
We don't know, Austin.
I'm just saying, you're kind of speaking in the past tense there.
We haven't seen Vhagar, Austin.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. People have been asking where she is. Lena specifically has been asking where Vhagar is. That could have implications. Who knows? I'm not sure. But getting back to this juicy scene. After the belly burst, Otto was named Hand. And I love, like, even though there's probably, like, again, I don't know if there's any validity to Otto potentially being, like, encouraging the cause of the death, but just seeing Otto squirm, being, like, insinuated that he killed Viserys' father, that alone was just so, chef's kiss.
I feel like he knows where the conversation is going.
He clearly does, and
because that's his response. He's like, "That's not how I saw it," but it's weaker than that. It's almost resigned to. He's like, I mean, I'll get this one out just for my honor. But
yes,
I think the king's made up his mind here,
and I think Otto's cards are on the table. Like, everybody at this point knows Otto has been just trying to climb that ladder as high as he can get it. It's all out there. His ambitions are well known to the king at this point. And even Alicent was called a distraction. Like, like the king calls Alicent a distraction to what he's not.
He kind of outlines the whole thing.
But to me, like, as sad as that is, like, especially where we know where everything's going, I think this is like because we see the deterioration of the relationship on Alicent's side. I think this is the start of when we're seeing the deterioration on the king's side.
Ooh,
because
that could throw into question whether she was in on that plot.
Here's the thing.
Which clearly she's not.
She's not.
How does he know?
I don't think he necessarily, like, he may be thinking that, but for me, like, that's still just going to be at the back of his mind that she was a distraction.
Surely.
And he, at that point, Otto is, like, pissing his pants. And just...
Yeah, you thought Cristen was shitting bricks.
Otto is sacked. He is fired. About damn time.
And there was much rejoicing.
I was
from this half of the table.
High-fiving myself. I was wooting. I was dabbing up in my room over there, doing a touchdown dance.
Yeah, well, my celebration will come as a result of this next episode, but it's a good thing. I think this is a positive step for the realm.
It is, especially because there are some very solid options as replacement hands.
Hey, more on that later.
Now, this last scene, I think, is significant in many ways. Well, do you want to say anything on Otto?
No, you got it. He's out.
He's out.
Nice little monologue from Viserys there. He sort of broke it down.
He broke it down.
And gutted.
He got
poor Otto.
Poor Otto.
And this leads to our final scene of the episode, later that night, presumably, where the Grand Maester brings Rhaenyra a special tea. I fucked it up. Tea Plan B.
Tea Plan B.
If you will.
Which, to me, one tells that the king doesn't believe Rhaenyra.
Yes. But it's also a really nice note to end on. Just because it puts you inside Rhaenyra's head, where she's like, well, okay, clearly this is, one, my father doesn't believe me. And I forgot to mention earlier in this conversation that he has with Alicent, before the conversation that he has with Rhaenyra, before the conversation he has with Otto, he says, I know that Rhaenyra isn't telling me the whole truth. She's not entirely innocent in this, even if it's not so bad as Daemon says.
Yes.
So he's already outlined that, but this is him communicating that to Rhaenyra, that he doesn't trust, that nothing happened. But then Rhaenyra's over here like, well, I didn't have sex with Daemon, but I did have sex, and I don't want to have a baby about it.
Here's the thing, Austin. Did she drink the moon tea? We don't see her drink the moon tea.
I think she doesn't. I think she risks it. We don't get confirmation one way or another.
I want to dive into something so badly, but we'll save it for a future episode. But I don't think she does, and I think there's proof of it that she doesn't do it.
All right. Well, we'll get to that one later. There's a little tease.
That's a little tease right there. But that's my hot take. She didn't take the tea. She did. But good episode, great episode.
Excellent. After talking about it with you, I think I'm gonna say this is my favorite episode so far.
I was literally just about to say, like, this probably is the best episode we've seen so far. I'm excited for the next episode. I know the next episode's gonna be another banger. May not be as good as this one, but still a banger. Probably no moment sweeter than seeing Otto. And
that's the pinnacle of the entire show. Although, dude was hand for 4 episodes. In the grand scheme of things.
2 kings.
Okay, yeah. Fair point.
He served 2 kings.
But I'm also thinking this has been our longest record. Oh, so I'm going to wrap up quickly.
All right, where can they find us?
But that does... okay. 1 paragraph on to wrap up the episode.
Yes.
I do think it bodes well for the quality of the episode that we had so much to talk about. I also feel a little weird about how we said so many good things about the episode with the least dragons in it.
This is a dragon movie podcast.
After all. But there's more to come.
Don't worry, my beauties. You'll get your time in the sun.
For the audio listeners, Bryce is fondling his dragon figurines. Oh, he's going in for a kiss. He's unzipping his pants.
Austin, where can they find our socials? Where can they find us online?
Right. So Big Flying Lizards, we are available to stream on most audio platforms. We can also be found on most social medias under the handle Big Liz Pod.
Big Liz Pod.
While we're here, I would like to remind you, the listener, to do whatever form of engagement is appropriate with whatever platform you are consuming this podcast on, be that liking, commenting, rating, all that good stuff. It means the world to us, especially where this is a brand new show.
Yeah.
Any little bit of engagement can really, really help. So anything you're willing to do, we appreciate it. You got any prompts for any comments on the YouTube?
Did Rhaenyra drink the tea?
There we go.
Comment below if Rhaenyra drank that tea. And you know what? If you can rock a stash.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like for Bryce's mustache, please. If nothing else. Dude, commitment to the bit. We're digging deeper on our bits here. I think that's what our audience is looking for.
They want commitment. We're giving them commitment. But we appreciate you staying as long as you guys did with us. Like, subscribe, share, comment.
Episode 5 next week.
Episode 5. Good night.
Later.
That's all for this week's Dragon Lore. Takes cold and hot, spread shore to shore. Enjoyed yourself? Please join the squad. Follow on social media at Big Liz Pod. And one quick reminder before you go, to rate, review, and share the show. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. See you next week, same time, same spot.